Hi guys, welcome back to Reignited. On this episode, I'm going to show you how to replace a broken valve spring on a HEMI engine without removing the cylinder head. Stay with me.
Here we go. Broken valve spring. Right there.
So there it is. We're dealing with a broken valve spring, which, while not totally uncommon in the HEMIs, I think it's more an issue with the fact that I was using an aftermarket cylinder head and something about those springs, I don't like the look of them. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through and replace all of those aftermarket springs with some factory springs out of another cylinder head that I have. Now today happens to be a holiday, so no shops are open. I'm going to have to try to make a special tool to actually replace these valve springs, but I think I can pull it off, and I'd like to bring you guys along with me. So I hope you enjoy it. All right, so the first step in making this special tool is I'm going to cut out a flat plate of metal that bridges across all of the rocker stands, and I'm going to drill the holes for the stands for that piece of metal so I can just bolt the whole thing down flat. So that is the very first step. We're going to cut out that piece of metal. We'll go from there. All right, now we've gotten our plate cut out that bridges across all of the rocker stands. Now we're gonna drill our holes. That way we can bolt this piece down and then we can move on to the next piece. That hurt a lot. I'm giving myself a black eye with that one. Wow. Ouch. That was a genius move. Ow. As you guys said, it definitely took me longer than I was hoping to get this tool together, but I really think it's gonna work out spectacularly. Again, this isn't something you're gonna have to do. You can just actually go get the real tool. But for me, I'm under a time constraint, and it being a holiday, I can't get the tool. So I just had to make one. And I'm kind of happy I did, because now it's gonna really help me out in the future when I have to do this again, because I'm sure I will. So, but you saw the big long piece that I cut off that bolts to the rocker towers themselves. On the back side, I went ahead and welded some captured nuts on there, and you'll see why in just a moment. And then I made this little tab piece here. It's got a little bit of a bend to it. I cut off the end of a socket. This was a 13/16 socket, just to scrap one I had lying around, and used that and welded that to it. And I'll pull you in close here and show you exactly how this thing works. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and bolt this guy down to the rocker towers here. Now, this piece here goes over the spring assembly. Then you just tighten it down, and what it does is it compresses the valve spring down far enough to where you can get the keepers out. There it goes. All right, there's a little pick tool to help loosen the keepers. Stick a magnet in there. There we go. And there's one keeper. And a second keeper. Now, all you have to do is loosen it. Spring comes off. All right, so on this older cylinder head, sometimes the valves like to drop down with it. So we'll go ahead and give it a little tap. There we go. Hey, I self-removed one of the keepers. Got the other one. All right, so there you have it. I'm actually really happy with the tool. I think it worked out great. And as you can see, I have all 8 of the valve springs removed from this old cylinder head. Now we're gonna go ahead and swap these factory style valve springs onto the remanufactured cylinder head, because again, at this point, I just don't trust those aftermarket valve springs anymore. With the one breaking like it did, I'd like to replace all of them with factory parts. Ideally, I'd like to replace them with new factory parts, but in this case, time being a factor, can't do that. So I'm just gonna go with some factory ones that I already have. And I already spoke about how we're going to do this in the vehicle, because you saw there I was kind of moving this head all around. I can't do that in the car. Well, I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a moment. All right, we're outside now, so I apologize if it's a little bit breezy from time to time, but here's what we're going to do. So I've already removed the intake rocker arms last night, and I've replaced it with the tool I just made. So now I'm going to remove the exhaust rocker arms. Now what that's going to do is that's going to close all of the valves and make it as though all of the cylinders are at top dead center. Then what we're going to do is we're going to remove a spark plug from each cylinder, and we're going to put in my compression tester tool. And what you do is there's a little Schrader valve on the end of these things. You go ahead and remove that Schrader valve so the air can just pass straight through. You go ahead and screw that tool in. Add shop air to this, and basically that'll pressurize the cylinder and it'll keep the valves pushed up against the cylinder head. That way I can use my tool to press down the spring and remove the springs, and the valves will stay up the entire time, as long as you have a good seal. So if I have a bent valve in there, I'll know it real quickly, because I will hear air hissing out of the intake valve if it is bent. And I don't believe it is, because I stuck my borescope in there last night and didn't see any signs of any contact with the piston. And also the valve spring itself kind of wrapped up into itself, and I think that kept it from being able to fall down far enough to where it could hurt anything. So anyway, let's get those exhaust rocker arms off there and get this going. So I don't know if you heard that there, but the air was blowing really badly through that intake valve, and then I just pulled up on the valve, and now it's sealed in place. So the valve is sitting up. So I probably won't even have to use my tool on this one, because it is broken after all. I don't really want to lose the keepers though. Okay, so there you have it, broken into 3 pieces. I don't know, something about these aftermarket springs, I don't trust them. Anyway, let's get a new spring on there. All right, so I noticed in there that it looks like the valve stem seal got kind of popped a little bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. Yeah, so I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see this. You kind of mushroom the end of it a little bit. So I'm gonna replace, there we go. I'm gonna replace the valve stem seal with a new one as well. I have to say, these little valve keepers here are a huge pain in the butt. Trying to get those things back in place. The best solution that I've always found is to take the keeper and stick some of this trans gel in there, or assembly goo, or whatever you want to call it. And that'll give it something to stick to. So then you just kind of slip it down in there and use a pick tool or something else to guide it into its proper place, guide them together, and then remove the tool slowly, and it'll kind of center around it and then tighten it up. So anyway, that's the best option I've always found. It takes some finagling to get them into place though, no question about it. Here we go. All right, so I pushed the other one into place. Now I'm going to slowly loosen the tool and hopefully it guides itself right into place. Just like that, you've replaced the valve spring in the car with the head in place. So not that tricky, especially if you already have the proper tool. It's actually a really straightforward process. Again, Hemis are kind of known for breaking valve springs. It's not the most common thing, but I have seen it a fair bit. So anyway, that's how you do it with it on the car. I have another 5 to replace in here, or I think another 4 more to replace in here to get everything to factory springs. I'll put this thing all back together again and hopefully she runs correctly. All right, you guys, just got all of the valve springs swapped out with the factory parts. Went ahead and put everything back together again and cleared the codes. This thing should fire up right now. Let's give it a try. So there it is, guys. In that last clip when I fired it up, you may have heard a slight stumble there. I found out that's because I accidentally left the number 8 fuel injector unplugged from when I had the rail out the night before. Plugged that in, cleared all the codes, thing ran perfect. There was a little bit of lifter tick there from having the push rods out, so just had to let it run for a little bit. She ran great. Took it for a test drive, everything seemed all good. I went ahead and drove the car 2 hours to deliver it to the new owner because, again, I felt bad. It's just a bad situation. 30 minutes after he buys the car, thing breaks the valve spring. Just one of those freak accidents. So got that all replaced, got the car delivered to him. He was super happy, very, very thankful that I had done that. So I think it worked out best for everybody. I think the most positive thing that came out of that whole experience was building the tool for doing the valve spring removal. I actually modeled this thing off of the LS style tool that I had seen. This thing's great. I think it works better than the factory tool does for the Chryslers. I'm really, really happy I came up with this thing, and now I have it for the future. So that was really nice. Taking a bad situation, every mechanic's worst nightmare, essentially a vehicle you've just worked extensively on, comes back on the hook or the tow truck, or in my case, on my own car trailer. Really not great. You don't feel solid about it, but in the end, it turns out it was not an assembly error. It was just a parts failure of an aftermarket valve spring. So got that all changed out. Made the best of a bad situation. That's all you can do. That's working in the automotive business. Sometimes things don't turn out the way you want them to. You just got to accept it and then do what you can to make it right. And that's what I tried to do in this situation. So at least now you know that's how you can replace a valve spring with the engine in the car. You don't have to take the cylinder head off. Again, the reason I was able to do this is because there was no valve to piston contact. I went ahead and inspected the piston with my borescope. There was no signs of any contact there. And when I put cylinder pressure, or when I put shop air to the cylinder, I could hear that it was sealing properly. There was nothing leaking past one of the valves. So I knew that the valves themselves were not bent in that scenario. If the valves are bent in any way, you would have heard some air escaping. And of course, in that situation, you're going to have to go ahead and pull the cylinder head and replace those valves, which actually on a Hemi isn't really a huge issue either, but you do run into the fact that you got to replace the head gasket. You're going to have to change the coolant. You're going to have to change the oil. So it's a little bit more involved, but still not that bad. But I hope you guys learned something today. Have a tough episode. I am completely exhausted. That was a long day, no question about it. But we did something. I hope you guys learned something. And as always, comment on the video. Tell me what you thought about it so far. If you like what you've seen, go ahead and subscribe. I have a lot of other different content available, more mechanical stuff, more fabrication stuff. So anything you're into automotive-wise, I hope you'll subscribe. All right, you guys, we'll see you next time on Reignited. And if you're wondering, yes, in fact, I did give myself a black eye when this thing swung up and hit me right in the face. Just another example of the fact that you really have to be paying attention as far as everything that you're doing. When I had this thing clamped in the vise, clearly I did not have it clamped well or properly, and that's when it'll cost you. And honestly, I'll take a black eye because it could have been worse. It could have smacked me right in the eyeball itself, which would be something I would regret for the rest of my life. So technically, I kind of got off easy on this one. So just another reminder, when you're working on anything automotive, make sure you're really taking your time to do things correctly. I was rushing, and that's exactly when you make mistakes. So take your time, and I probably should have been wearing some safety glasses as well because I was drilling, and that probably would have prevented it at least a little bit. So anyway, again, take proper safety measures when you're working on automotive stuff, and you'll come out the better for it.